Hello and welcome to the first status report to the war in Ukraine. My name is Torsten. I'm a military historian living in Panama. I've served in the German army. I've written books. I've been a politician, among other things. I am running a German channel about the same topic where I'm already at sitrep 27, but I thought I'm going to try it in English too. So let's start with the situation around Kiev. In the west, it's unclear. There are reports about counterattacks by the Ukrainian forces. Some of them, some other reports say they weren't successful, they weren't even happening. The fact seems to be that the counterattacks have not achieved any further gain in territory, according in comparison to the last 24 hours. A journalist from the Economist tried to reach the liberated city of Mykolaiv and was stopped by heavy fighting along the road to Zaporizhia. According to him, the mayor of Mykolaiv told him that 15% of the town is still in Russian hand. According to this, the map we have here would not be accurate. Right now, the fighting seems to be going on along the line Hostomel, Irpin, and down to the road to Zaporizhia. The intel reports are saying around Bucha and further west there is fortification works ongoing by the Russian forces, and we further have reports about Chechen Rosguardia troops here in Borodyanka. That's for now almost everything from the western side of Kiev. In the east, the forces have managed to do a new attack in the direction of Brovary, but the Ukrainian forces have foiled that attack and beaten back the Russian invaders. This is an indication that the forces on the east of the city are kind of strengthening again after the arrival of a new tactical battalion tactical group in the last 48 hours, and it could be an indication of an improving supply situation east of the city. Generally, the supply situation should still be stretched, with small attacks along the supply lines happening all the time. What the map doesn't show here, but I have reports which seem to be accurate, is that the Russian forces actually have reached and are still in Baryshivka, which should be somewhere here. So they more or less block the communication lines in the direction of Poltava. Not completely, as we can see here, because there are parallel roads, even though those are only 2 kilometers, so it's unlikely that this can be used. Depending on how far they are west towards the international airport, the supply runs might be able to avoid contact with the Russian troops by going further south on the connection road. But it's still a distinct possibility that the majority of all connections to the east are cut off. Generally, the situation around Kiev is rather unchanged over the last 48 hours. There are small counterattacks by the Ukrainian forces, but which are more cosmetic than strategic. There's been no breakthrough, and with the superiority of the Russian forces in the air and their plenty supply of artillery and the help with drones, it is unlikely that the Ukrainians will be able to mass enough forces for a significant counterattack to push them back. So whatever we can see here will be small troops that are fighting house to house, gaining a small town, a small collection of a few houses, but not an overall breakthrough. So in this regard, Kiev will likely remain halfway besieged on both sides, but the Russian forces, on the other hand, are not able right now, and don't seem to be in the near future, to be able to break through and cut the supply lines, cut the lines of communication to Kiev, both in the south and to make sure they're cut in the east. In Chernihiv, the usual over the last weeks, artillery and air bombardment, but no attacks with ground troops towards the city. There are reports, though, that ground forces are trying to encircle the city and are thus advancing around the city, but not on the city itself. What is interesting is that the reports so far here and the maps show Slavutic as being firmly in Russian control. The latest report, though, is that supposedly the Russians were advancing on Slavutic and were beaten back by Ukrainian forces. So it seems to be an indication that there are actually Ukrainian troops still in the area that are commonly understood as being well under Russian control. Sumy, still one of the accumulation points, one of the problems behind the Russian lines, is still in Ukrainian hands. It's still under fire with artillery and under air attack, but so far there has been no ground offensive, no ground attack on the city to take it. And even though we are probably awaiting it for more than a week now, there are no signs that it's coming in time. So nothing new here. In Kharkov, it's close to the same. The artillery, Russian artillery is shelling the city, and it has hit a supply point where humanitarian aid was handed out and killed 6 civilians and wounded 15. While the Ukrainian General Staff has said its own artillery was able to do heavy damage on a battalion tactical group of the Russians, while it's unclear of which unit, either the 59th Tank Regiment or the 144th Motorized Rifle Division. Anyways, so according to the Ukrainian General Staff, they did heavy damage with artillery to one battalion tactical group. We don't have enough confirmation yet to actually verify that. In the Donbas, it's fairly unchanged but critical at the same time. Izium has received reinforcements 48 hours ago, more or less, of 1 to 2 new battalion tactical groups, who apparently seem to have started a new offensive, but according to the reports were beaten back, and they supposedly retreated to the south of Izium, while the center of it, according to the mayor, is still under Ukrainian control. So how that works, I can't really say. It seems like at least they have enough control of Izium that they are able to go around it and continue their offensive south, despite having Ukrainian forces in their back, which would be an indication for their strength and their ability to interdict further Russian advances. Further Russian advances have also been in Popasna and in Rubishne. Both towns are still partly in Ukrainian hands, but the Russian forces are advancing and gaining more ground, which is making the situation in Donetsk more and more critical for the forces here to be cut off. There are smaller reports about smaller battles around Donetsk. Here in the right around, where is it? We have in the north of it, we have an attack here in at Avdiivka, I guess. There's a report of an attack and a further one here at Ocherentye, and social media reports of massing of Russian tanks to the east of it, both in the north. So the fighting, the Russians seem to be slowly gaining grounds here, but this is the area with the heavy fortifications where the front has been mostly static for almost 8 years, so any advance here will be really painstakingly slow. While they seem to have gained some ground in this area, right to the west of Donetsk at Maryinka, the Ukrainians supposedly have beaten back an attack by the Russian forces. That's about it for the Donetsk. In Mariupol, there's now the report of that the Russian forces have actually reached the church of what is it called? Church of the Intercession of the Mother of God, which, as we can see, is right in the center of Mariupol. So the situation gets more and more critical. The Russian forces are heading into the city. They by no means are conquering it yet, but the advances are visible. And while we can't say how strong the forces are here and whether they have, it was just a spearhead that has retreated, it seems to be that the Ukrainian forces increasingly lose control over the area, over the town. While the fighting is going on, video evidence has proven that Chechens and naval infantry is involved in the fighting. Naval infantry, over the last days, we had reports of at least one of the LSTs, the landing ships, unloading its heavy material close to the city. So this part of the forces will likely have been moved to the city to attack it, as we see naval infantry here, which means that the burden, the pressure on Odessa for a possible amphibious invasion is even lower now than it has been before. There are rumors and reports, which I wasn't able to confirm, that they have trucks with loudspeakers going around in the city, which the Russians, which claim that the evacuation route to Zaporizhzhia is closed because the Ukrainians don't want to take in more refugees, and that Odessa has fallen to the Russian forces and that the Ukrainian government has abandoned the people in Mariupol. So if that's true, then it would be a clear propaganda campaign trying to make the people, in the fighters and the civilians in Mariupol, to lose hope to advance any capitulation by the forces there. What has changed though is in Berdyansk. In Berdyansk there was a report, not a report, we have seen an attack by the Ukrainian forces on the ships that were there in the harbor, and one of them was an Alligator class landing ship, which was hit and seemingly burned down. The damage is massive, and we can see here a small video about it, where we see it burning. And it's a time lapse, and you see the front gate is open, you see the fire inside, and interestingly enough, one of the fleeing ships here has white smoke, the other one has black smoke. So the two Ropucha class landing ships have also been damaged. This one, pretty sure, the report is it sank into in the harbor in 5-meter depths, but that doesn't really matter because the ship is from the 60s, and after that fire it's so burnt out that it's not only definitely unusable for the rest of the war, repairing it is highly unlikely that it's financially viable. On whether the other ships, how damaged those two are, there is no real, we can't really verify it. One seems to have a somewhat serious fire. We can see it back here, where we see the black flames, and where we see the black smoke, and we can see flames in between. But whether this actually is an indication of a hit, I can't say. The initial report was that the attack was done with a Tochka missile, ballistic short-range missile, but so far this seems unlikely. I was trying to calculate the force of an impact of a 2-ton heavy missile that is hitting with over Mach 3, but unfortunately that was too difficult for me. I didn't manage to. The missile itself has 450 kilograms of explosive, and I would at least imagine that 3-ton, I think 3-ton is the Alligator class landing ships, 3,400 tons, yes. So the hit by a ballistic missile with 2 tons of weight at Mach 3, so over 1,000 meters, what is that, 3,500 feet, I guess, something like this, would seriously damage the structure. But as we can see, flames in the front of both, seemingly damage of both ships at the front, that would indicate what was later reported, that this was a Bayraktar TB2 by armed drone by the Ukrainian Navy, and that would explain it why all ships are hit in the front, whereas one single missile hitting in the front should at least damage one of the landing ships in the back and not both in the front. We can see here, that's right at the beginning. You see they are right behind each other and thus should have damage. One should have it in the front and one in the back, but it doesn't. So that would indicate that it was actually a precision-guided munition from a Bayraktar. So let's go back. We finished about this front in Zaporizhzhia. Here, there's no change. There seems to have been a local counterattack in this area here, but the change in territory is insignificant. Supposedly, the advance here in the Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa region, they did another attack in the direction of Kryvyi Rih, but were beaten back, and the mayor of Kryvyi Rih reported that its city is still outside of artillery range. In the Mykolaiv Kherson area, there are fighting going on at where the two oblasts are meeting. This is here, we can see it here. Here is the line, so roughly, probably along this road here mostly is, so we see it fairly, deleted it. We see it fairly well here on the map. In this area there's more fighting going on, but that's about it here. In general, this front is likely, the direction of Mykolaiv is likely going to be quiet over the next days. Odessa, even though it's unprofessional to give a strict prediction, but I would say Odessa is safe from naval invasion probably for at least 2 weeks, if not longer, maybe even for the rest of the war, because with one less landing ship and one landing ship damaged, while they unloaded the naval infantry, seems much more likely that the Russian forces now concentrate on encircling the Ukrainian forces in the Donbas along the line of contact at Donetsk and Luhansk, where we can expect to have the majority, not the majority, but probably a third to half of the best Ukrainian troops being stationed there. And if they manage to encircle this, that could decide the war for them. So in this regard, it makes perfect sense to concentrate the forces in this direction. For that, they will probably have to take Mariupol first, because after that all the forces involved around Mariupol, artillery, air forces, as well as the ground troops, would be able to push either Zaporizhzhia to Dnipro, which would then endanger Kharkov as well, and either mandate a full evacuation of the Donbas or encircle it, or they will just push around roughly through the middle, trying to meet the spearhead coming from Izium south. Anyways, even if the Ukrainians were deciding to evacuate, this would likely involve heavy losses, as this is so close along the front line and close to Russia, where heavy Russian Air Force units are situated, and in an area where the majority of the Ukrainian air defense seems to be already taken out of commission, being destroyed. So any retreat by the units here, which might be necessary in the near future, will likely involve massive losses. So this is the area where the Russians can decide the war for them, or have at least a chance to decide. So it makes sense and is likely that they will concentrate their forces on encircling it. In taking Odessa in comparison to this is completely insignificant. And Kiev, the forces are likely going to be mostly static, maybe smaller incursions, smaller attacks, to keep the attention of the forces concentrated around Kiev, so they can't be used and shipped, for instance, for counterattacks from Zaporizhzhia or somewhere else. This is in the northeast. On the other hand, we might see an attack on Sumy to take it and to ensure better supply to the forces east of Kiev, but we would expect that attack for at least a week now, so it might be that they actually decide to rather send the troops for that, maybe for the Donbas as well. In general, this is the situation right now. I found a few interesting other things. This is really interesting video I want to show you. It's from the Kherson area, where it shows demining activity. This is quite interesting too. It almost looks like they entrenched the buildings, so it must be some kind of local way of building there, or they actually dug up earth and tried to more or less fortify existing buildings, even though that seems unlikely to me. But what we see here is the trench lines that are being built. And we see here in some competence at least, we have moving trench lines to prevent troops that are stationed here being destroyed by an artillery hit here, and that could be a position, a firing position, for instance, for a machine gun, even though I can't really determine that as I don't see the overall picture. The difference is very stark to what the Armenians did in the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, where we saw them building straight trenches, completely no defense in that, etc. If we continue forward with the video, it's quite interesting too how deep and how enhanced their trenches already are. We already see it reinforced with wood here. It even, like, this is almost reminiscent to World War I pictures, and would indicate that they expected and hoped to hold this for a longer time with the Rasputitsia beginning now, the mud season basically of a month or more. Those trenches might be gone under, might be swamped with mud if they aren't reinforced. But it is impressive in which short of a time they managed to build this. These here are dragon teeth. I think they are a German invention before World War II, mostly famous for the Western Wall, the Siegfried Line, as the Americans like to call it. And here now we see demining, and it's quite interesting. We see, first of all, the professionalism that we have missed in many other videos that we saw. We see a BTR securing the area and having its turret to the side, where we will see in other pictures that there's some kind of wooded area, so where it's more likely that enemy forces are. And here we see them spread out widely and infantry securing the whole demining effort. Obviously somebody doing the demining here can't concentrate on whether in those woods is somebody popping up to shoot him, so he needs protection, and this is an indication of partisan activity. Here we see them with rifles, those two, and here we even see one in the front. Obviously you want to have the guys with the metal detectors in the front, but here he's on a paved road, so it's no danger for him, or no big danger. And while those two can concentrate on their job of demining, he can provide security. So in this regard, I would say I was just in a recon unit. Demining is not my specialty, but also here he indicates warning hand sign, as I learned it as well. The hand raised up means attention, and you immediately take cover. And here now they found something. You see the sign, mining sign. He keeps his gun on him, also professional. It's uncomfortable. It would be easy to drop it to the side to not have it hang in your way, but if the enemy attacks in that way, in that moment, you couldn't defend yourself. So you see a professional team here. Unfortunately, I was not able to identify what it is here. This thing would look like a bomb. But this doesn't really fit the end piece. It's definitely not a mortar. Mortars look different. For a bomb it seems far too small, and this end piece looks kind of weird. Here we see they taped metal pieces, screws and stuff like this on this piece, which is likely filled with explosive. And as we see him walk away here, and with his movements before, it seems highly unlikely that the object weighs more than 25 kilos. So what's that? 60 pounds more or less. And I wouldn't know that the Ukrainians have bombs of that lightweight. If somebody watching it knows better, I'd be happy to see a comment in this regard. Here we see the demining going on, continuing. Here on the other side now we see the Czech designed, Czech invented anti-tank barriers. And obviously here the dragon teeth again, and here it seems like it's those huts that we saw in the trench system, and it would make obvious sense to lay mines in front of an area like this when this is defended. And we see here that this is obviously a serious minefield, so they have laid those ropes to mark areas either for demining or areas that are already cleared. And as we can see, they found something. This is a TM62 anti-tank mine, and this should be a TP200 explosive. So the anti-tank mine is designed for usually a pressure around 200 kilos more or less, so that a soldier can step on it without it exploding, because it's meant to be hidden until a tank or a heavy vehicle drives over it to blow it up. And here they just place their own explosive to blow it up. And in this regard, as we can see, I think this is definitely a better trained force that we can see here. One more thing nicely in the end is supposedly 12 Rosguardia officers from Krasnodar refused to go to the Ukraine and were fired. And there are two things. Either they said what we see here, that it's illegal because they claimed it's illegal to be sent to Ukraine because they are meant to be used in Russia. I saw another reference to that, and it said that they claimed they don't have passports and they need passports to go to another country. Whatever is true about this, I can't judge at this very moment. The author is a journalist from Russia that is supposedly working for the Washington Post, so I can't really say how trustworthy that source is, but it would be a really good sign for the Ukrainian side, because the likely reason of those 12 guys refusing the order wouldn't be some passport issues, but rather them being afraid of being killed in Ukraine. And if the first units inside of Russia refuse to go, then the time is definitely ticking in favor of the Ukrainian forces, as long as their own morale keeps up, because in the end they will be able to suffer more losses than the Russians without collapsing. At least that could be the theory. This would be a good sign. On the other hand, one could say the Russians can clamp down if they introduce martial law and executes people like this, then probably the refusal and desertions would go down. But we will have to see how radical Russia's reactions are going to be against that. I will finish with a report that according to according to the some precision-guided munitions have a 60% failure rate on the Russian side, which would be a devastating report. Everyone knows in the topic that some of them fail. That's quite normal. Some stray off, some drop earlier. There are examples of, like, for instance, the Pakistanis have found Tomahawk missiles that were meant for bin Laden in the 90s after the attacks on the embassies. And they were able to reverse engineer the Tomahawk out of that, because it was in such a good shape when they salvaged it. But 60% is a failure ratio that is far too high. We see this here. This is a Tochka missile, and if we see the shape of it, as I said, it has 2 tons of weight. What's that? 5,000 pounds, let's say, roughly that, and flies at Mach 3. If that missile, and it's designed to hit at an 80-degree angle. So if this missile is properly working, it'll hit, even if it doesn't explode, it'll hit with such a force that it'll mostly disintegrate. As this seems to be almost in workable condition, it actually seems likely that it was launched and the engine failed after a second or two, so it basically just did a small jump out of the transporter erector launcher and dropped right in front of the vehicle intending to launch it, because it seems to be in like such a perfect shape. Anyways, I want to finish it here up. This is an attempt to see how well it would be working in English. I intend to do a live stream tomorrow, somewhat around 10 p.m. Eastern time. And if you've seen it, it would be nice to see you there tomorrow. Until then, if you liked it, give me a thumbs up, give a comment with if you have something to comment, and subscribe if you liked it. See you tomorrow.